Hello, my name is Colin Hollander. I'm a graduate student at Morningside College. I'm a social studies teacher at Kennedy High School in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And my study is on the effects of direct instruction of academic vocabulary on 12th grade student engagement. So, when it comes to why this is a problem, I broke down my study into three parts: vocabulary, direct instruction, and engagement. When it comes to vocabulary, it's not being taught in classrooms on a regular basis. Students are expected to learn new vocabulary words through things like reading a textbook. Direct instruction is also not being used as an instructional method, though it is one of the most effective instructional methods. And engagement, between 25 and 60% of students are not engaged in the classroom on a consistent basis. And as students progress through their K through 12 education, this gets worse. Review of the literature. So again, it will be broken down into three parts. We're going to talk about vocabulary, then direct instruction, then engagement. When it comes to academic vocabulary, there are two types of academic vocabulary. One is called general academic vocabulary. So it can be used across multiple different grade levels, multiple different subjects. So when you're using words like analyze or you're going to evaluate something, that's general vocabulary. There's also domain-specific vocabulary, which is specific to a subject. So if I'm talking about, economics, some domain-specific vocabulary would be things like fiscal policy or monetary policy or the Federal Reserve. That would be domain-specific because it's specific to a content. So for the purpose of this study, when I refer to academic vocabulary, we're referring to domain-specific vocabulary. Vocabulary gives students background that they need to understand content, but again, is rarely being explicitly taught to students. Also, there have been studies that looked at the effect of not teaching vocabulary to students, and the results were that students who were not taught vocabulary in the classroom tend to be less engaged. They also tend to skip over words because they don't know them, leaving holes in their learning, which leads to more frustration. Another study examined students' vocabulary on their performance and found that students with large vocabularies perform better in school. They also tend to be more engaged as well. Direct instruction. So when it comes to direct instruction is any instructional strategy that is led by a teacher. So when we talk about direct instruction, one of the things that always comes up is that it's lecture-based instruction, which is not necessarily true. It's also one of the most effective strategies for presenting new or difficult material to students, and generally starts with the teacher explaining to students what the topic is, and then they go into a guided practice so the teacher can clear up any mishaps that the students may have, and then leads into independent practice. Students who were taught using direct instruction were found to retain information twice as much as students who were taught using a textbook. It's also, again, another study found that it is one of the most effective methods, but is not being endorsed by many teacher training programs, again, because of the bad stigmatism that comes with when people think of direct instruction, they think of lectures. And again, students who learn more academic vocabulary through direct instruction than any other instructional strategies. Student engagement. There are generally three components when we talk about student engagement. There's cognitive, which is the time and effort a student is willing to put into schoolwork. There is emotional, which is enjoyment that they demonstrate. And then there's physical, which is demonstrated through physical activity or effort. When we're in a classroom setting, we will see cognitive engagement more often than the other two. The older a student gets, the more their engagement decreases. By the 12th grade, we found that more students are disengaged than are engaged in the classroom. Students who see themselves as competent in a content area are more likely to be engaged. So students that understand what's going on in their classroom are going to be more engaged. And students are more engaged when they interact with their teacher over interaction with peers or interaction with the learning, which direct instruction is based on peer to or student to teacher interaction. The purpose of the study was to determine if the direct instruction of academic vocabulary influenced student engagement. The hypothesis was that the direct instruction of content vocabulary taught at the beginning of every class period would improve student engagement. For this study, our independent variable is the direct instruction of content vocabulary, with our dependent variable being student engagement in the classroom. And for this study, we employed an experimental design where we had one group as a control group and one as experimental group who received the vocabulary intervention. Methods. For this study, we had 48 12th grade students ranging from ages 17 and 18 broken apart into a control group and experimental group, where the control group had 26 students and the experimental group had 24. We had 18 female students between the two groups and 30 male students. 5 students had IEPs, 2 students had 504 plans, and 3 students qualified as ELL. The location of the school is a suburban high school in eastern Iowa with a population of roughly 140,000. Materials. For the intervention, we needed a smartboard, a computer, and the use of PowerPoint. The other material that is needed was the measure that was used, which is the student engagement instrument. Student engagement instrument is a 35-question scale that measures 6 different subscales. For this study, only intrinsic motivation and control and relevance of schoolwork were measured. Ones that didn't pertain to those 2 subscales were simply blacked out. The reliability of the subscales for intrinsic motivation was 0.72, and the reliability of control and relevance of schoolwork was 0.80. Validity was confirmed in a study that sampled 1,931 ninth graders. Procedures. The daily intervention of 1 to 4 vocabulary words. When students would enter the classroom before the lesson starts, they would be introduced into vocabulary words that are going to be unfamiliar that they're going to see for the day. So on the smartboard, when the students would come in, would be the vocabulary words with definitions that they would need to write down in their notebook in their section just for vocabulary words. After the students write down the vocabulary words, we ask students if they are able to come up with any examples. And as a class, we come up with roughly 2 examples for each vocabulary word that we can write down. After that, the intervention ends and the daily lesson begins. Data analysis. Student engagement instrument was administered at the beginning of the 6-week intervention and again at the conclusion. Both the control and experimental group received the same student engagement instrument, with only questions pertaining to the 2 subscales of intrinsic motivation and control and relevance of schoolwork. The SEI uses a 4-point scale ranging from strongly disagree, to agree, or strongly agree as the student's choices. At the end of the intervention, an independent t-test was used to compare means and standard deviations of the SEI of both the pre-test and the post-test. Results of the study. As you can see from the p-values on the post-test, there is a statistical difference between the control and experimental group, showing that the experimental group was more engaged in the classroom. When it comes to the means of the 4-point scale, on the pre-test, the control group mean was roughly 2.54, while the experimental group had a mean of 2.63. So the means were only 0.9 apart in the pre-test. When it comes to the post-test, the mean of the control group was 2.63, showing that it didn't increase very much, while the experimental group had a mean of 3.17, showing that it was 0.53 higher than the control group. Because of this, the hypothesis was confirmed. Students who received direct instruction of academic vocabulary were more engaged in the classroom. Implications. One implication of the study is the teaching of academic vocabulary is fundamental to students' understanding of course material. Currently, unfortunately, this is not occurring in many classrooms, or if it is, it's infrequently occurring. Another implication of the study is that direct instruction still remains a proven effective teaching method. This should be used by teachers when presenting new or unfamiliar material to students. The third implication of the student is that student engagement is pivotal to learning in the classroom. By increasing students' understanding of content, their engagement also increases. Teachers can increase student engagement by directly teaching academic vocabulary to them. Limitations. One limitation of this study is the time frame of the study. The study only took place over a 6-week period, which is not enough time for conclusive results. During this time, there was 9 snow days, 3 early outs, and 2 2-hour delays, which led to less favorable experimental conditions. Another limitation of the study was the dynamic of both the control and experimental group. Both groups were heavily dominated by male participants, which was not a good representation of the school population as a whole. Also, most of the IEPs in the 504s were only in one group. Another limitation of the study is the definition of engagement. Engagement has broad definitions, but this author's definition was driven by the student engagement instrument. Several elements of engagement were also not measured in this because they didn't pertain to classroom engagement. The last limitation of the study was that the student engagement instrument is a self-reporting measure. So participants, when they were being studied, it could have altered their results because they knew that they were being studied. Recommendations. A few recommendations is that the study should be conducted over a longer period of time, perhaps over a semester. The study should also be performed in multiple grade levels in multiple disciplines to see if academic vocabulary, the teaching of it, shows the same results in a high school, a middle school, and perhaps an elementary school. Another recommendation is to have more variety in the participants, equal in both the control and experimental group. Have roughly the same number of male and female, same number of ELL, 504, and IEP students. The last recommendation for this study is that it be performed with other measures of engagement. Because the student engagement instrument has its own definition of engagement that could be different than other people's definition of engagement, it's important to use the same study with a different measure of engagement due to the broad definition of engagement to see if we can get the same results. In the end, I have enjoyed this process that I've had to go through. This has actually impacted my teaching, and I do put a lot more emphasis on academic vocabulary, and it has showed some good results, especially with seniors in high school. With the last few months of school, we were able to still keep them relatively engaged. Thank you.